Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm really liking this whole like 5 things Friday. It's kind of what I have it labeled in my to-do list. Video idea list is like 5 things of whatever. So I think I'm going to keep going with that for at least a while because I have quite a few ideas of 5 things. And today's video I'm going to do 5 books about adoption that I absolutely love. I have dog hair, just kind of chilling. I don't know where it is. Anyway, so 5 adoption books that I love that I'm going to recommend to adoptive parents out there, potential adoptive parents, or anyone that's interested in adoption. These are 5 books I recommend, and just ignore the fact that I'm slightly going crazy. There's a hair, like, maybe it's my hair, maybe it's attached. Anyway, so these are specific ones that I have read and reread, and I just felt like that I got so much information from them. So I'm not going to do it in any particular order, but let's get started. So the first book that I'm recommending is the Parenting Your Internationally Adopted Child book. This is one that I only started reading, I think, after I went to Bulgaria. It could have been even maybe just before that, but I really liked it. It has tons of ideas for attachment. It has tons of problem-solving tips and tricks and all that kind of stuff, where it's like, here's a problem that you're having, here's how you solve it. And what I really like with the book is it's a lifetime book. It's not just a here's things to get you started when they first come home. It is really like, here's issues that you will be dealing with at the beginning. Here's issues you might be dealing with later. Here's issues you might be dealing with as they grow older. And it kind of just goes over everything. And it really like has great ideas for trauma. And I highlighted a lot of stuff in that book. And I think that's a book that I probably will reread a lot, especially as she grows up, because the things that have in my mind right now are like those beginning stages things. But I think as she grows up, obviously she's going to have different challenges, and we're going to have to go back to that and see, okay, this is the issue I'm having. How can we work through that? So I just thought it was a really good book with a lot of information, but some really good suggestions. The second book that I'm recommending is Attaching in Adoption. That book I started reading years ago, like when I started doing private adoption, which was 2014. And I've read it probably about 3 or 4 times now. I haven't read it recently, but I just found that, again, it has lots of adoption attachment stuff and just a really good ideas on building that bond with your child and problem solving and stuff like that. I don't like it as much as Parenting Your Internationally Adopted Child, but I think that's because I haven't read it recently. Maybe if I reread it now, which I'm going to eventually reread it again, but I just don't have those ideas fresh in my mind like I do the Parenting Your Internationally Adopted Child. I have heard from other people, though, that the Attaching in Adoption book was very helpful for reading after they were home in the moment. So like as you're going through the stuff, it was more helpful to read it then than to pre-read it. So I haven't read it probably since maybe 2017, 2018. So for right now, I think I'm just going to focus on the stuff that I learned in the Parenting Your Internationally Adopted Child. And then once she's home, I think I will reread or start rereading the Adopting Your, what was it called? Attaching in Adoption. So I think I'll start rereading that one once she's home, and maybe read it in conjunction at the same time as rereading the first couple chapters of Parenting Your Internationally Adopted Child. So the next one I want to talk to you about is specifically a toddler adoption one, and that's called A Toddler Adoption, The Weaver's Craft. Now this book, I want to say I read it in around 2015, 16 for the first time. I actually have the physical copy. I should have brought it, but it's one of the few books that I have a physical copy of because I prefer ebooks of like everything. But anyway, I just thought it was a really good book that goes through multiple experiences of adopting a toddler, mostly internationally, I think, but I think it does have a couple like foster care examples. But it kind of just went over that toddler stage, because with private adoption, you tend to adopt a newborn, and with foster care, you tend to adopt like a preschooler or older. With international, you can adopt, obviously, toddlers and up. But like that toddler stage is just a weird stage for development. And so I just thought it was really good that it kind of went over those things, because like there's a lot of things where they don't comprehend or can't communicate like some of that trauma, but it still exists. And so for this book, I just found it was really good to go through some of those heavier topics to do with toddlers that weren't in some of those other books. Because, like, for instance, the Parenting Your Internationally Adopted Child, there's a lot in there that I was like, that seems like if it was an older child. And my daughter is a toddler, and obviously she has different stuff with her developmental delays, but still she doesn't fit that whole toddler area, or that whole older child area. So there was some stuff that I'm like, you're asking the child this, but she's not going to be able to communicate that. And so I just like that this book went over a lot of toddler stuff and that toddler developmental area, just more specifically than just this kind of broad all ages group. The other toddler adoption book I really liked was, I think it's called Adopting a Toddler, What Shoe Size Does She Wear? And that I started reading in like 2014, 2015, and it was the first toddler adoption book I ever read, and it was at a point in my life where I was kind of frustrated by my adoption options with private adoption, and I was looking into adopting from foster care. I later found out that I couldn't adopt from foster care because of where I was living, but it just got me into that mindset of what it would be like if I adopted a toddler instead. At that time, I was also looking at international adoption, which at the time I had talked to a few agencies about different countries and stuff like that. Somehow I didn't get across Bulgaria. I don't know how I didn't, but anyway, because Bulgaria was happening. But somehow Bulgaria did not cross my path at that time. I mean, things happen for a reason, and my daughter wouldn't be my daughter if I found her then, or found Bulgaria then. But anyway, so I was trying to wrap my head around not having a newborn, because at the time, that time in my life, I was very much set on newborn adoption. Having them from birth, having this like blank slate, which now with doing more adoption research, you don't have a blank slate with any child, because that trauma that they have from being taken from their mother even at birth is trauma. But anyway, I was hoping, at the time I was imagining myself having a child from birth, and so I got this book to kind of help me see what things I would be coming up with and what issues I might come up with. That's a book I reread, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but Weaver's Craft, and I've reread recently, I want to say in the last 6 months, but this one I haven't reread in a while, so I think I'm going to pick it up and reread it before she comes home, because it just brought up a lot of those, more like the technicalities, not so much the attachment stuff and behavior stuff, but those like considerations, like the fact that what shoe size does she wear was an issue, because unless you are lucky like Bulgaria where you have multiple trips, it's kind of harder to know what your child's size is. But even with me, things change, so you don't quite know. But there was just some interesting stuff in there that I really liked, and more about, I found like the technicalities of adopting a toddler more so than that specific attachment issues that you might come up with. The last adoption book is probably my favorite one that I have ever read, ever. And I have a feeling I'm probably going to read it 5 million times. And it's funny because originally I was not even going to purchase this book. And then I met my daughter and I was like, I don't need that book. She's fine. And then when I got home, I was like, I'm going to buy that book. And I'm glad I did, because I knew some stuff with my daughter, but then reading the book, I was like, oh, there's a lot more going on than I even realized. So the book is called Love Me, Feed Me, and it's all about the feeding stuff around adoption, which I knew there was issues with hoarding. I knew there was issues with the way they are fed, and with malnutrition, and there's a lot of trauma around food and adoption. It's unfortunate. But there was also a lot of stuff in that book that, for me personally, not to blame my parents or my grandparents or anyone like that, but there was a lot of stuff about even the way I was raised around food that I could see in my adult eating probably was caused by the way I was fed as a child, and those kind of mindsets and stuff. So anyway, I just was like, wow, this is a book that I think every single parent should read. Whether you are adopting or not, I feel like it is such an important book to read about how we feed our kids, how we treat our kids while we feed them, how we pressure our kids to eat certain foods. All that stuff is like in this book, and it is so flippin' amazing, like mind-blowing amazing. And so a lot of stuff that I was like seeing in my daughter, I was kind of brushing off, but now reading this book, I was like, that's something that I know I'm going to work on, because this book says, like, shows me what that can turn into if I don't work on it while she's young, kind of thing. And so I have a feeling we're going to reread a lot of it. Or I'm going to reread it. She's obviously not going to read it. I'm going to reread a lot of it once she's home and as we're going through things. But I really wanted to read it all to begin with before she came home, so I would have some ideas. And I'm so glad I did, because it is an amazing book. Like I said, by far probably my favorite adoption book ever, just because it goes into so much to do with that parent-child relationship and how food gets involved in that. And so I think by reading this book now, I'm probably going to have some things that I can prevent from happening from the get-go. But if we do come up with problems, which we will come up with problems, it's it's when, not if, that we're going to have issues. I have this guide that I know I can either go in the highlighted areas or wherever. Highlighted a lot of stuff in this book, and I can just quickly go through and see, oh my gosh, this is an area we're struggling with. What are the solutions for that particular problem? And as she gets older and different problems come up, then I know. Which with adoption, with parenting in general, your child is not a blank slate. Your child does not come with a manual, and things change over time. So regardless of how she is when she comes home, that can change in 2 minutes. It could change in 2 months. It could change in 2 years. Some of the feeding issues they have in this book, they've been talking about like a decade long, 10 plus years of this feeding issue going on, or being okay for the first 5 years and then having an issue come up. So unfortunately, you just never know when that trauma is going to come up or when those issues are going to come up. So you need to work on it. The other thing I really liked about this book is it does talk about like actual physical developmental delays, like physical development delays in terms of eating. So my daughter has Down syndrome, so she has low muscle tone, and quite often they have small mouths, so their tongue is fairly large, and so they have problems keeping their tongue in their mouth because their mouths are so small. And she has a very typical tongue thrust where she has trouble swallowing and she can't chew. So there's actual delays in terms of how she eats, and I really like that this book talks about that a bit more. Obviously, she's going to be seeing a feeding specialist and occupational therapy and speech and language and all those therapies that are going to will be working on it as well. But I like that this book actually touched on it, and there's so many things in this book that I found were really helpful for, even though she'll be on purees when she comes home, they still cover that kind of thing. I do find that a lot of it has to do with a bit older children that can actually feed themselves and pick and choose what they want to eat and stuff like that. But for her, I still found that there was so much good ideas, and not only for when she first comes home, but obviously for when she grows up, and obviously she's not going to be on purees forever, hopefully. Moving her feeding journey forward, I have those strategies in place, or I know at least where to find those strategies. I just love that book so much. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Those are my 5 book recommendations for adoption, or if you're planning on adopting, or you have adopted and you're looking for some resources out there. Those are my 5 favorites. 2 of them are toddler specific, but that's the world that I'm living in. But the other ones are great general books. I've read a lot of adoption books, a lot. I think I started reading adoption books probably around 2007, 2008, maybe a little earlier than that. And I don't remember all of them. And so when ebooks started to become a thing, I like them a lot better because I don't lose them when I move. Not that I'm I'm not moving again, but I have moved a lot until I moved here. So some books did not make it on its way here, but ebooks are great because I can always have them. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you have a favorite adoption book. Honorable mention is what's it called? Oh, I wish I could remember it. It's something like the Complete International Adoption Book. I'll post a picture like the others, but it's by Dawn Davenport, and I read this book, I want to say around that 2014-15 era as well, when I was looking into international adoption. But then 2015-16, when I was driving back and forth to the fertility clinic, I was actually listening to Dawn Davenport's podcast through, I think it's called Creating a Family. It's been a while, but it's probably bad that I was listening to adoption podcast while going to fertility stuff. But it was just, I had a long drive and that's what I listened to. So I listened to a lot of her podcasts, and there's just so much great information through that. And I just really, really enjoyed listening to her podcast. There was so much stuff on attachment and stuff. Anyway, her book is really great. Also check out the website because I found that really helpful. There was also a Down syndrome parenting one that I listened to. There was like two dads. Can't remember his name. If I figure it out, I'll post it and let you know. I wish I could remember what it was called, but it was like it was Down syndrome dads or something like that. And I remember they had Rachel Coleman from Signing Time on there. I was like, oh, Rachel Coleman. Anyway, so that's how I spent my hours driving to and from fertility clinics, learning about Down syndrome and learning about adoption. So I am exactly where I'm meant to be with adopting a child with Down syndrome. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. This is way longer than I intended to be, but I felt it important to give you guys those 5 books and let you know about them because they are just fantastic. So let me know in the comments below if you have a favorite adoption book, and I will see you guys next video, which will be Monday. Bye, guys.